time to turn up the attitude. We'll be talking about the Attitude Era here today on Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show. Hello, once again, I'm Skylar Sigdaddy Sigmund, ready to talk the Attitude Era, but I have a special guest here on this episode of Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show. He's a good friend of mine. We were college classmates in radio, and he's a fellow wrestling fan. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, JBK, Jimmy, how are you doing, man?
Doing fantastic, brother. Thanks for having me on the show. Born and raised in Indianapolis, and kind of have an oddly rich history in professional wrestling with the charity work that I've done and just family associations. So excited to be here. Excited to talk about an industry that's a lot of fun. You know? It
is a lot of fun. While a lot of fun, it can be toxic as well. Quite toxic.
Yeah.
Especially the fan base, but that's fan bases of anything can be especially toxic. But we're not going to get into that toxicity here on the show. And we're not talking about the System of a Down song, by the way. But we're going to be talking about the Attitude Era here today, but we're also going to be talking about other things, because more of like a campfire chat, very informal conversation here about professional wrestling, the Attitude Era. And just kind of actually, I want to start this off with you and I's kind of relationship, and giving the listeners like a brief viewpoint of how we kind of met up. And tell your side of the story, Jimmy.
Well, I came to know Skylar since we were classmates at the University of Indianapolis. We worked at the same college station, 88.7 WICR.
The Diamond.
Yes, 88.7 The Diamond, which was a jazz format, oddly enough. So, from the ages of 19 to 22, 23, I was, talking about jazz of all things on the radio. But we got great experience, did a morning show together. And, since the world has migrated to podcasts, we're both doing that. Basically, you need a podcast to have a driver's license these days in the United States. So
everyone's got one.
Yeah.
Are they all good?
Yeah. Well, there's plenty out there, plenty of opportunity for anyone to put content out there, which is a good thing. But, we're media professionals now. We're out in the real world trying to make our way. And, like World Wrestling Entertainment, it's an emotionally violent kind of business where, you can be at the top one day and then fall pretty quickly another, so.
Yeah, and you're definitely right there. It's a roller coaster ride. The world of media, radio, television, all of that kind of stuff. But talk about your kind of first experiences with professional wrestling. How did you get into it?
So actually, it goes back to I should say this about myself. I'm a person with a disability. I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when I was 18 months old. And the first initial exposure that I had to professional wrestling was growing up as a kid, kind of watching the Ruthless Aggression part of that era in WWE. But my doctor, who became my physiatrist, the person that handles all the muscular issues and anything physical related to my disability, he was a semi-professional wrestler before becoming a medical doctor. So we founded a professional wrestling event called Timmy Takedown that enabled rehabilitation patients to become a professional wrestler for the day. And because Dr. Chuck was trained in being able to perform maneuvers, he's able to execute them in a way that people with disabilities or rehabilitation issues that get better over time, they're able to participate without getting hurt, and can have the boas and the big music, anything that you would expect to have at
all the pomp and circumstance, of course.
Yeah. And what was great about it for my family was, Skylar, this, being my college classmate, but my dad was a professional musician in Indianapolis for 40 years, and at our initial event in 2001, it was just raining. It was just sheets of rain coming down. And my dad had a gig the same evening as the wrestling, but ended up setting up the sound for the event. And because the other event was formal, I think it was like a wedding reception or something, he had a tuxedo. So, he was
Nice.
in the middle of the ring with the microphone and introduced everybody. So it really did kind of look like a formal one, even though it was very much informal, and it got bigger throughout time. It got sponsors, and the last one that I was really hands on with, I got all of the different affiliates in Indianapolis to show up at Riley Children's Hospital for that event. And not to name drop, but one of the folks that I emailed was Charly Arnolt, who is now with the WWE. So
actually, he's now with ESPN now.
Yeah, well, yeah, she has been seen on WWE.
Yes, I remember her. She was Charly Caruso in WWE.
Okay, yeah. So, and I'm not saying I gave her the story that got her the job, but she did the Timmy Takedown story, and then within a month, she's with Vince McMahon. So.
You take credit. Take credit.
The JBK bump, my friend, is a real thing. Let's make that a clear statement, okay? Yeah. So it's, and let me name drop again. This is my mom. A deeper family history in wrestling. My mom grew up and went to Ritter High School. Grew up on Kessler Boulevard in Indianapolis, and was next door to Dick the Bruiser, who is arguably like the most famous wrestler from Indianapolis. So
he's from up in where I live. Actually, he was born up where I lived.
Right. Yeah.
So where I live currently. So he's from Delphi, Indiana. That's where he was born in.
Yeah.
So.
And moving on from that, you have Scott Romer, who is one of the world's most famous wrestling photographers, who married his daughter and then became the photographer for Timmy Takedown. So I really have kind of been involved and have interacted with folks firsthand that have covered a lot of events or are responsible for folks being in the WWE now. I mean, the wrestling event, I'll say this too, that when we would host the event initially, we had us come out first, and then we hired Ohio Valley Wrestling, which eventually became NXT, the training ground for WWE. But because the crowd was drawn for the kids to be there, eventually we had to have OVW open up first. So it's probably the first time ever in wrestling history that professional wrestlers opened up for kids.
It's like, oh man, that's like,
awesome.
You're like, so pretty much. So there's this saying that goes in professional wrestling here. It's like, thanks for the house. So the OVW guys were thanking the kids for the house.
Definitely so. And just to give you context for the kind of roster that they had at the time when we were doing this event, I mean, they had Shelton Benjamin, Batista, John Cena, Brock Lesnar. My manager was Matt Morgan, the Blueprint, who went on to go to TNA Wrestling and was a world champion there. I mean, the roster that Jim Cornette and Rip Rogers were able to develop, it's still, some of the players are still the backbone of the company.
Randy Orton, John Cena, Benjamin's still there, Brock's still there.
Unbelievable. Bobby Lashley, I think, was in OVW.
I'm pretty sure you might be right. Yeah.
Just really impressive athletes and guys that were multi-talented. It's not just dudes that had the look, like an Ultimate Warrior. They had the look. They had the ability to talk, to deliver a promo. Like, really a golden era of talent that came through.
That is looked at as the best class that ever came out of any training facility ever, because those are most of those guys are, almost all of those guys that you mentioned are Hall of Famers. No question.
Yeah, no question.
It was unbelievable how Cornette and Rip were able to get those guys, just to get them at the beginning, and then just see how their careers just took off.
To be fair, and I'm not putting down their teaching, because you do need the guys to allow skill to develop. But when you have a guy as talented as Randy Orton, a multi-generational superstar, and Paul Heyman brought this up, I couldn't believe it, because when I thought back and how many moments Brock Lesnar had, he was only there for 18 months, his initial stay.
02 to 04.
Yeah. But think how many moments he was able to generate from throwing Zach Gowen, who I met firsthand and was in Professional Wrestling International magazine with. Like, he threw him down the stairs. He had the superplex with Big Show.
Multiple world title wins.
Yeah, I mean, some very classic moments.
He was the guy that took the fall against Eddie Guerrero when he won the WWE Championship.
Right. Even in losses, they were ones that you remember. Even his last match at WrestleMania 20, which was awful.
It was awful.
Was memorable. You know what I mean? Like, and then he ended up getting signed by the Vikings and like cut after week 3 of the preseason. But
then he went and worked in Japan, and then ended up in the UFC, world champion, back to WWE. Everyone knows the story.
Apparently, he's happy now.
Oh yeah, well, he's making money, not doing a whole lot.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think he's got his own like butcher meat business or whatever now too.
Okay. There you go.
But yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about that. And so speaking of, like, we're talking about wrestling and your favorite kind of the Timmy Takedown. So who are some of your favorites growing up?
Man, obviously, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. I was a really big fan of The Undertaker. I kind of grew up not with Dead Man Undertaker, but like Biker and MAGA Undertaker, which is kind of interesting, looking at where I am now. But Kurt Angle was tremendous. I liked the Hardy Boys.
Those were my guys.
The TLC matches with Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys. Like, you had such a diverse and deep roster. There was different options. And you didn't crap through your matchups. Like, you could mix and match a lot of different things.
Like the best, I was gonna, sorry to interrupt you here, but like we look at the Attitude Era as a whole. Mm-hmm. Quite possibly the greatest pay-per-view in wrestling history came from that era, the peak of that era, which was WrestleMania 17 in 2001.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if I'm correct, that was the one WrestleMania where I think it was in Houston. Undertaker was the main event against Triple H, and like, he drove his bike, down the ramp, which was kind of cool. He was able to rip it a little bit. That the thing that kills me about WWE, I mean, it's basically, for folks that don't understand wrestling and are like, oh, it's stupid, I say it's a soap opera for guys. That's exactly what it is.
It is. People don't get it. There's people just never like be able to do it. It's like doing a math equation in their head. It's like this big long equation. It's like, why do people like this stuff? I don't know. Why do you like your TV shows? Those are fake too.
Yeah.
Nothing's real about those shows. The risk they're taking on those in the matches, that's real.
If this were The Young and the Restless, okay, the original character is Ric Flair, okay? He's still somehow on the show. And is he going to wrestle, Skylar? Like, what's the date on the new last match for Flair?
I think it's this weekend.
Not to date the podcast, but
Yeah, well, we're recording this on Tuesday the 19th. Ric Flair's last match, and he's actually fighting an injury right now too, heading into that last match.
Yeah, being old. Age. That's
73 years old.
And
July 31st.
Jay Lethal will be able to sell enough that it'll look fine.
And Jarrett will do the same, because those guys are pretty much pretty safe guys to work with, and he's teaming up with his son-in-law.
Oh, cool.
Andrade El Idolo, who's married to his daughter Charlotte Flair. So it'll be an interesting tag match. It's a pretty stacked card, actually, if you look at it. I'm not going to get into details regarding it, but
Right.
It's a very, very, it's like a super show level card because they had to move from one venue to another because it was so, the tickets were running out so fast because of, well, Flair's a draw. We all know this already at this point, but
Yeah.
Flair, he is the epitome of sports entertainer, really.
Yeah, I mean, there is a song called Ric Flair Drip for a reason, man. I mean, he still is kind of viewed iconically as a guy that, likes to show off and is the styling, profiling, limousine riding son of a gun. So, that's actually what this shirt says. I would read it, but then I wouldn't be performing. So
yeah, hey, it's all right. Yeah, that's for those who are listening at home and not watching along. But yeah, Jimmy's wearing a Ric Flair T-shirt saying "Styling, Profiling, Limousine Riding, Jet Flying, Kiss Stealing, Wheeling Dealing, Son of a Gun."
Oh, also, Skylar, another connection that I find it weird in this life. You had the Colts during their playoff run. I think it was 2015, 2016. They used Ric Flair as kind of a celebratory thing of give me 2 claps and a Ric Flair, that was kind of different.
Yeah, he did. And they did the entire promo too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down.
Oh man, that was great. Yeah. That was a good time. Actually, that was fun.
That was fun. A great time.
Well, and Pat McAfee, speaking of Indianapolis related, Indiana related things, McAfee, we had him on the podcast, not the podcast, but the morning show back when we were in Indianapolis. Speaking of which, he was on his phone during this, about to wreck his car.
That was a horrible driving decision.
But we're talking about his celebrations and stuff because he would imitate professional wrestling. He'd do the Razor Ramon. Rest in peace, Razor Ramon, by the way.
Yes, sir. He was on Diamond Dallas Page's documentary.
Fantastic.
The Jake the Snake Roberts, which
was a great redemption story.
And I'm doing DDPY in order to get into shape now. I would recommend that to anybody.
And it's life-changing, man. It's certainly life-changing.
It'll turn back the hands of time, baby. You want those back aches and hip aches to go away? Do it every day and it'll get better. I promise you.
DDP's insane, by the way. This dude's 65 years old and can hold his leg over his head.
Yeah, with all the chronic injuries he's had in wrestling. Man.
All respect to him, man. All respect to him. And let's get into the moments from the Attitude Era because this was the hottest time, arguably, in professional wrestling outside of the late '80s. Hogan, Hulkamania, mid to late '80s, Hogan, Hulkamania, all that stuff. But it's argued between this and that era, the Attitude Era of the Hogan era, and then the Attitude Era of which era was the most. The best era for WWE, which honestly, I would say the Attitude Era more so than from an everything standpoint, I think it's the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Because it was more catered to the adult. So back in the 80s, mid 80s to early 90s, it was catered actually to the mid 90s it was catered to kids. It was catered to kids 8 to 10 or what, not 8 to 10, but from 5 to 11 or 12.
Very cartoonish.
Mm-hmm. But when you started the Attitude Era, you injected reality into it. That's really what it was. And it was just some of the wackiest crap you will ever see.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Some of the somebody about got their private sliced off as well at one point.
Pardon? When did that happen?
It was Kai and Tai, which was a Japanese group in WWE. They had Val Venus, if you know the.
Was it kayfabe or for real?
It was kayfabe, of course.
Okay, thank God.
But they had him hanging up. They had him hanging up in a locker room.
Right.
And they had a sword ready.
Oh, geez, man.
And Val Venus is pretty much a porn star. That's pretty much the character.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's the other thing too, man. I'll go back and watch old episodes and I'll be like, oh, That's what they meant. I didn't realize that when I was 7, watching the material. As far as the moments that I can recall, man, Kurt Angle had the milk truck, which was an updated version of Stone Cold and the beer truck.
Which only happened like a couple years earlier.
Yeah, yeah. And, Booker T and Stone Cold fighting in the grocery store. That's classic. And then another moment that I can recall is the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club.
That would.
Yeah. Well, no, it was when they basically teased Vince, with The Rock, Trish, and then eventually allowed Rikishi to give him the stink face, So,
I remember
that was
one.
Nice.
Because I remember they've had William Regal join it, who's now in AEW, by the way.
Oh wow.
William Regal. They had Jim Ross do it, who's in AEW too as well.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a common thread here, isn't there?
Yeah.
Common thread here, but no, some of those moments are definitely ones that stick out to me with the Milkomania. Like we. By the way, this is our second attempt in recording this. By the way, we had some issues last night, but
hey, we're rolling, baby. We're all right.
We're rolling here. But we discussed this last night, where like Jimmy mentioned, he's like, who knew we had milk trucks in 2001? Right. Because exactly. that happened in August 2001. Who had a milk truck at that point?
Yeah, I mean, very 1950s. I mean, that's Andy Griffith Show. That's what I think about when I think of milk trucks.
I think Jim Ross had a call during that. He's dousing him with dairy.
It's milk. Yeah. Also, Mick Foley, who is a Hoosier, a lot of connections back to Indiana. Jim Ross and The Undertaker throwing Mankind off of Hell in the Cell, and good God Almighty, they killed him. That whole thing.
Yeah,
that was funny.
And then Jerry Lawler in the same match says, after he gets thrown through the cage and with the chair hitting him in the face, he's dead. And yeah. There's also a part of that match. Speaking of another Indiana guy, Terry Funk. He was born in Indiana.
Yeah.
He's more known of being from El Paso, but he was born in Hammond. He had to come down to give Mick time because Mick's just absolutely screwed up at this point completely. After going off the top of the cell, after going through the cell to the mat below that didn't budge at all, which is, gosh. Terry Funk gets choke slammed literally out of his shoes.
Right. Yeah. It's dude, like I know that a lot of the maneuvers are performed and executed in a way that it doesn't hurt too bad. When you take a fall like that, that's a legit bump. Like, that's what I've realized as an adult is these guys are athletes and they're putting their bodies on the line. And we've seen with like Dark Side of the Ring, all of the A&E biographies, like there's wear and tear. There's issues that go along with that. And, professional wrestling is not for the faint of heart. You're probably not going to end up in a very good situation in the long term, unless you can properly manage your body. So.
And even at that, you're still going to have issues by the end. There's still going to be lingering issues. I think Kurt Angle he had a painkiller issue at one point, but he had to get double knee surgery. I think he had to get like knee replacements and all that. So he had to do that. There was just so many other injuries that come into play in professional wrestling, but it's not ballet. That's the best way to put it.
Oh man,
not ballet. We talked about the Austin Booker T's supermarket brawl, which is one of the wildest things you'll ever see in wrestling ever. Speaking of milk again, why does milk get used twice in this? But Steve Austin literally hides in a freezer during that, comes out drinking out a half a gallon of milk and says, "Hey, Booker, got milk?" And then just starts wailing on him. He hits him with like a like a thing of bread too.
Baguette.
Yeah, baguette. He's singing "That's some more." He just starts, and I think as he's checking out, he slides Booker across the thing. He says, "Piece of trash on aisle 3" or whatever, as police is pulling up. And oh my gosh, it's
Oh, I know another moment too that involved going into the street. I can remember there was a storyline between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle, and Stone Cold stole Kurt Angle's Olympic gold medals and was going to toss him, over a bridge or something. And it ended up that Kurt Angle kidnapped Stone Cold, like handcuffed him, blindfolded him, and then he dropped him into like a kiddie pool, to make it feel like he was in the river, but like it was just a classic way of screwing with who at the time was the top guy, like.
Yeah, and Austin was, and the funny thing about this situation, Jimmy, is that like Austin, as much as Austin's heel turn gets kind of bashed because they thought it was kind of ill-advised. Because they tried, well, the thing was, the way they tried to do it was they did it in Texas, which is Austin's home state, which made no sense, by the way. They tried to turn Austin heel in his home state, which that's not going to work. But like some of Austin's best moments came during his heel run, which is the craziest thing to think about.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I've learned, at least from the psychology of wrestling, and anybody that is any kind of fan on a weekly basis would know this, like when you're a heel, your job is to grab the microphone and say what the common person would never say. You have the platform to do that. And Austin, being able to deliver, Austin 316 says, "I just whipped your ass." Like, he's going to be perfect for a heel. Even if he's, not going against the powers that be and Vince McMahon, like the aggressiveness and the rattlesnake thing kind of allowed it to form in a good way, in my view.
Yeah, and it was the comedy part of the heel Steve Austin character was so much fun because it was him and Kurt Angle going back and forth mostly. And one of those moments too, speaking of Kurt and Steve Austin, is there's a point. So Stone Cold buys cowboy hats for him and Mr. McMahon. Kurt Angle gets one as well.
Yeah.
But it's much smaller. It's a little kitty cowboy hat. And it's like
and he sings he sings Jimmy Can't Crack Corn, right? Or
I don't know if maybe during that same episode, but Austin says, like, Austin gives him the hat, and then Kurt Angle's like, "I feel like a real cowboy. Yippee-ki-yay." Kurt was a master of making an ass out of himself.
Yeah, you kind of have to be shameless if you work for Vince McMahon. One show that I can recall watching a lot, man. I had it on like VHS tape, and I still have it somewhere. It's how valuable the tape is to me, in spite of having WWE Network available. But I watched. It was like a end of the year New Year's Eve special in 2001, and it had like the best of the year. And 2001 is arguably the best, calendar year for WWE. So it really kind of surmised that whole time, and it was
Attitude Era,
entertaining. Yeah.
And we're still speaking about Stone Cold Steve Austin here, but there's another one that sticks out too, and it involves Mick Foley as well. Mr. McMahon's in the hospital. Mick comes in with them with the box of chocolates, the clown, and McMahon wants him out, but then there's a doctor in there. But that's not the doc. It's not an actual doctor. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin to open up a can of whoop ass. And he certainly does that on the October 5th, 1998 Raw, coming disguised as a doctor, sticks the catheter up McMahon's backside, which was very funny because you just hear McMahon going, "Ah, ah, ah." And then the best part,
Oh, go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
The best part of it, God, Austin grabs a bedpan and just swings at McMahon, and you just hear this big gunk.
There is a good sound when it hits the cranium, dude. It's nice, yeah.
And I think McMahon told him, he's like, "Hit me as hard as you can with it."
That was legit. Like that's a bump you would have to take. One thing I was going to say about Vince McMahon, I would love when he would fire somebody. The whole "you're fired," like totally from the depths of hell, and pulling that out, and you had during this whole time, by the way, guys, in spite, with everything going on, he also launches the XFL in 2001.
The XFL.
Yeah. This is the XFL. Like, it was just the worst, dude. And you had like that 30 for 30 talking about the truck that ran out of gas. Like, that's the reason the league folded. It was a dude forgot to fill up a production truck with gas.
Jiminy Christmas. They had some good ideas that the NFL actually stole from.
Totally.
They did. There was a couple of ideas they did.
Mm-hmm. The on-field cam.
Yeah, that was definitely a good one.
And the bird's eye view cam, that travels on a wire.
Other ideas? No.
Well, even the kickoff situation, you would have one player from each team just run into each other. You had people getting injured left and right, and the game wasn't even kicked off. Like, you can't have that.
There was a legendary line that came from the XFL. It was Jeff Brom, actually, who's the current coach of the Purdue Boilermakers.
Yep.
He said, "Oh, so am I alive? Do I have a pulse? Yeah, let's play football." Because he got concussed like the week before or something. He got absolutely pretty much killed the week before. And in this day and age, he would not be playing.
No. Well, and I think if I'm correct, they had, Tommy Maddox was in that league. Like, he was a decent player. They had a few good guys, that were playing.
And Tommy Maddox ended up playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sorry, sports nerd right there, but sports nerd coming out. But the XFL was a part of the Attitude Era, if you think about it, because I think The Rock initially introduced it, came out for the opening game, and was hyping it up and stuff. Which now, looking at hindsight, he runs the XFL with his ex-wife.
Yeah. Well, and too, man, it's another connection. This is just the way life works, I think. You had the XFL get relaunched in 2020, or whenever that happened. Andrew Luck's dad was the commissioner, Oliver Luck, So, again, it comes back to Indy and our relationship. Oddly enough, guys, this podcast is kind of it summarizes a lot in the wrestling business.
Yeah, it does certainly. And one big moment from the wrestling business, so WCW back in '99 was starting to get WWE guys were coming over from WCW. WCW guys were starting to go over to WWE. I mean, that's what the idea was. But one of the biggest debuts of them was Chris Jericho back in August of that year in '99. He interrupted The Rock, of all people, during his promo. The Millennium Clock hit, the countdown, and he enters, cuts a promo. And his initial run wasn't great, but once he got going, man, he's arguably one of the GOATs now. Still going strong at 51.
Yeah, I remember. As I said, I was a really big fan of Undertaker, and I bought kind of a documentary on him called "The Undertaker, This Is My Yard," and it showed that promo that Chris dropped, and I can remember the Undertaker, in his voice saying, "You need to shave that peach fuzz," and and the thing that Undertaker would always do, I think he still does it, is he would roll his eyes in the back of his head like that. That is such a great thing to add to that character. I don't know if anyone else is capable of that.
Often imitated, never duplicated.
Yeah, man. Undertaker looks the part. He fits the mold for that character,
Yeah, and during that Attitude Era, it was actually kind of split into two parts, because for the first, I'd say, 2 years of it, because really they kind of marked the Attitude Era starting in '98, depending on what your takes are on it. Because you could say '97, around where Bret screwed Bret, apparently, which we all know the story of that. But you could say it started in late '97, early '98, but Taker had the dead man persona for that point, but then by about, I think 2000, I think it was at 99, maybe it was mid 99, where he introduced the biker gimmick.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to Undertaker, is that he's remained the same on a base level, but every few years he kind of changes. He'll change his hair, he'll change the kind of clothes he'll wear, that sort of thing. So as much as he stayed the same, he's also continued to evolve through time, which is cool.
And what's so cool about the Attitude Era is the spontaneity of everything. Like, you had some of the craziest things happen, which include, by the way, Mae Young giving birth to a hand.
Yeah, there was that. Yeah.
And Mark Henry was, at that point, WWE Hall of Famer now. Mark Henry then was Sexual Chocolate.
Oh, really? Was that his name?
Yes. His nickname was Sexual Chocolate, Mark Henry. And he had a great theme song. If anybody go and check it out. It's fantastic. We had The Godfather too.
Oh, right. The Ho Train.
The Ho, all aboard the Ho Train.
Yeah. And puppies. Jerry Lawler and his puppies. Yeah.
Jerry Lawler, man.
They objectified women on a weekly basis, buddy.
I'm happy. Back at it. Yeah. I'm happy they evolved.
The Me Too era would have had a field day with WWE back in the day.
That is for certain. That's for certain. I like the way the direction the women's wrestling's went since then, for sure, because it's really given the women an opportunity to showcase themselves, and outside of the bikini contests, bra and panty matches, all that stuff. Yeah. Some people will find a fondness to it. That's to each their own. But I enjoy watching the women actually get to perform and go at it like the guys do.
Yeah, man. I mean, they're as much as part of the show as anybody. The one criticism I would have for WWE, I mean, there's several, but one that stands out to me is, if everybody's a superstar, does anyone stand out? Like, I don't know. You certainly do have different tiers to the business. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. Like, yeah. There's certain people that are at this level, at this level, at this level, or at this level.
Right.
Like, it's like there's tiers to it. And I think, honestly, the issue is with unique characters anymore. There's not a lot of uniqueness to what they're doing. The way they're training these wrestlers anymore, like, they're all training them to wrestle them mostly the same, it seems like. Not all, but it seems like most of them kind of train the same. And they've completely went away from bringing guys off the independent circuit and bringing these people that are absolutely green as grass, off a college campus pretty much, and have them learn the WWE style of wrestling and have it that be their style.
Well, and tell you the truth, man, I mean, I'll drop a detail about my life. I grew up with my dad being part of the Bob and Tom band, so I've been in the radio and TV business since I was a little kid. But one of the things that got me interested in becoming a broadcaster was listening to Jim Ross. Like, the lack of creativity that they're able to have on air now, because there's limitations with the words you could say, and they're scripting promos.
Vince makes up 800 rules.
I mean, they're in a box. They can't do anything, basically.
You can't call them wrestlers. You have to call them superstars. You got to do this. Sometimes you have Michael Cole, who is good. Michael Cole's good. I've made that comment. Michael Cole's really good, but don't feed it. They have a tendency to feed him lines that sound absolutely manufactured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because they want to say this specific thing.
Yeah, well, and I think that Pat McAfee is a good athlete and can generate some buzz for the WWE. I think it's a smart move, but Vince knows that because the product is now on Fox, a basic or a network station, he's going to have to try to appeal to the broadest audience that he can. And he knows Pat, as a wrestling fan, is going to bring in the Barstool, uh,
his fan base pretty much over there.
Right. Yeah.
But
which is fine.
Which is fine. And that's fine. That's WWE is an entertainment entity. Like all professional wrestling companies they're entertainment, but there's some companies that focus more on the pro wrestling product than like others, which WWE doesn't really put an emphasis on the wrestling. It's more supposed to be character driven, but
yeah,
depends. And Pat McAfee's about to wrestle again, by the way. You're looking like it's going to be wrestling at SummerSlam.
Isn't Corbin a former Colt too? They were teammates at one point. Yeah.
Yep.
What position did Corbin play?
I think he was an offensive lineman.
Oh, he's a big guy, huh?
He was a big guy. Yeah. He slimmed down quite a bit since then. McAfee, I want to keep talking about McAfee here for a moment, but McAfee he's one of the best guys that I've ever seen coming cold off the street. Now he trained with Rip Rogers for a while.
He took some bumps. Yeah, I saw him.
But I'm just saying, a guy, former football player, former athlete turned pro wrestler. He is one of the best guys ever coming out of that. Just first match.
Cold off the street. Yeah, I mean, and to have to deliver a scripted promo is always difficult. But I think even with a script, he can make it
his own.
Like so much larger than life that he'll sell it.
And him being on commentary with Michael Cole has injected new life into Michael Cole.
Yeah, and it's a smart move. I mean, his most valuable asset is putting a microphone in his face and letting him go. I mean, and let me say this, knowing Pat through family connections and different things, like he's a very smart guy, and I think he gets bored quickly. So allowing him to have a little bit more room to operate will make that a better product.
Yeah, and they're moving to TV 14. Did you know that? Apparently.
So they're not going to be on Fox anymore.
I think they're going to be on Fox. I think maybe Raw or Raw might be moving to TV 14, which is on USA.
What TV for? Oh, you mean like the rating?
Yeah.
And what were they before?
TV PG. They've been TV PG since 2008.
So they're getting worse. They're getting dirtier.
Hopefully, I don't know what that entails, but
yeah.
These days, so Jimmy, I have an off and on relationship with WWE. I'll turn it on for the pay-per-views, depending on what it is. But anymore, I cannot sit through television with them.
Really?
I can't. It's in the way it's filmed, the lack of emphasis on wrestling. Because at my age, I want to see wrestling. I want to see the guys perform in the ring, and some of the best guys get pushed, and not some of the old guys. Like WWE has a tendency to push the old guys instead of trying to get new, fresh blood into things.
Uh-huh. I totally agree, man. Like it's the business is not in the place that you would want it to be, even though WWE is on a network at this point. Like it has to change, because you can only appeal to kids for so long until eventually you have to
try to appeal to adults.
Honestly, it was smart to go from, the ruthless aggression era to more toward kids. You had your roster aging. You needed to create new stars. You've kind of run its course with this strategy. So flip it again. Bring back Paul Heyman and those guys.
Heyman's been around.
Oh, see, I don't know.
Heyman's been around since Brock came back. It was before even Brock came back. No, it was around Brock. Around the time, a little after.
I found out, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like he used to write SmackDown, and when I was growing up, there were weeks I preferred SmackDown over Raw. It was a better show.
The thing is with that, Jimmy, you look at that ruthless aggression era.
Right.
Raw was the entertainment show. SmackDown was the wrestling show.
Right.
So, and a lot of people love that SmackDown show because you had the SmackDown 6 in there. You had Eddie Guerrero. You had Eddie Guerrero Kurt Angle, Rey Mysterio, Edge, Brock Lesnar was there as well. Undertaker was
And that
on
was
there.
the B show.
That was supposed to be the B show, but it really was the
Yeah.
A show if you look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was great, man.
John Cena was on there too. That was when he was starting to rise up too.
Oh, another element to my wrestling fandom. I used to play SmackDown versus Raw, all of the video games.
Oh, me too.
So, I even when I wasn't watching weekly episodes, I was, participating with the different products that they had.
So. And did you so what's the earliest copy of a wrestling video game?
Oh wow. I had a WCW game with Bill Goldberg on the front when I had a PlayStation 1.
Does WCW Mayhem?
Probably, yeah.
I had WWF SmackDown 2.
I had that one probably too.
And
yeah.
I had No Mercy, which is one of the most famous games of all time.
Yeah, every system that I've owned up until this last one, I've had a wrestling game.
I'm still rocking with the Xbox 360.
Well, they still have the networks open, dude. I'm not sure how much longer they'll even have those servers.
I've never had live, so but okay. I just played by myself typically, and I own wrestling games are a pretty important part of my childhood too, is just playing those and having fun. I still play them to this day. And so, but man, I'm on my old Xbox 360 where I have to hit the top to open the disc thing because it's jammed.
Man, the fact that you even have a 360 that hasn't faced like the red ring of death.
It actually has. The funny thing is, it did at one point. And that was early on.
Oh, really? Wow. See, I can remember horror stories. I used to have a PlayStation up until I got the Series X. But when I had my PlayStation, and Xbox owners would cry to me, I got the red ring of death. It's like, yeah. So's everybody else. 4 out of 5, whatever it was. So PlayStation always had my loyalty, but always fun playing the WWE games.
I've been rocking the Xbox 360 for 15 years now. Or 14 years now. I think I got the first copy of one of the first games I got for my Xbox 360 was SmackDown versus Raw 2009 with Triple H and Shawn Michaels on the front.
Even for the short time that I had a GameCube, I bought a wrestling game.
Was it Day of Reckoning?
I have no idea. It wasn't the greatest game in the world.
Was it may have been Legends of Wrestling?
It was based on, like, the concept of the game was it was based on momentum. So if like you weren't winning in the beginning, you weren't going to win in the end.
Okay, gotcha there.
It wasn't based on like ability. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh man. So like those kind of things like leave an indelible mark on our childhoods and stuff with the video games. Did you ever get wrestling magazines?
I subscribed to it and like had the action figures, but I never read them that closely. The biggest involvement that I had firsthand was like organizing Timmy Takedown and trying to get that all set up. I mean, I would work on biographies and music. I was involved with all of that each year. So.
Well, that's neat, man. That's neat. Yeah, I like my wrestling thing now is with like what I like to do in my free time is read wrestling autobiographies. Yeah. Last year I read like 8 different books regarding pro wrestling, whether it was autobiography, biography, or just kind of about individual wrestlers. There was one book I read. It was the Pro Wrestling Vault by Vinnie Barry, who is also a wrestling photographer, but that's down in Texas. Had an opportunity to interview him, read his book, Lance Von Erich. It was a Lance Von Erich book he helped write cool. with the Von Erich that wasn't really a Von Erich.
Oh, wait. So why is it just the character? Like having a last name?
So just to give everyone a history lesson real quick, but a lot of the Von Erich, there's only one surviving Von Erich brother of fame and Von Erich family in Texas. So they had to. So I think it was one of the first ones that passed away. They had Lance come in and replace him, which didn't work out. They brought in a guy bodybuilder type,
Hmm.
and it didn't end up working out. But it was an interesting story. But have you read any biographies about wrestlers?
Really the only extent, man, is like Dark Side of the Ring and A&E stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like there's some great books out there to check out and recommend everyone at home to read some of these. But Mick Foley's is definitely one of the
Oh
golden
yeah.
ones. The first Have a Nice Day, which is a very long book, by the way. It's like I have the mass market paperback, which is the smallest one, but it's like 700 and some pages. But
Yeah.
it's fantastic. You can tell Mick like when they don't have editors on these biographies,
Right.
really, they just have them like ghostwriters. That's what it is. It's more
Okay.
ghostwriting. Foley wrote everything himself,
Yeah.
and it just makes it so much better. And then like Chris Jericho's is really good as well. Reading that book, A Lion's Tale, the first one, because it
Okay.
covers up everything up leading up to his WWE debut, which we just talked about earlier, which was
Yeah.
him interrupting The Rock and the Millennium Clock and all that stuff. It's really good. You can because you can read it. The greatest thing about those books is you can read it in their voice. You can hear them pretty much speaking it to you. That's
Sure.
sometimes one of the best things about those books. But I want to get another question in before we decide to wrap things up here, Jimmy.
Yeah.
So, so we kind of both grew up mostly during the ruthless aggression era. Do you prefer that over the Attitude Era, or vice versa?
Um, I'm more aware of the ruthless aggression, so that's what I came up in, and I've met a lot of guys from that time. I ran through the list. I mean, uh, the one pay-per-view that I can recall going to during that time was the Great American Bash that was here, and at Gainesbridge Fieldhouse, and
The name changed like 800 times.
yeah, I don't know what the proper sponsor is at this point, but
It's Gamebridge. It's Gamebridge. You're right.
okay. But I got to meet the great Khali, uh, Rey Mysterio, Booker T, who was King Booker still at the time. Um, so I really have kind of been immersed in it through my first 27 years, and it's been a remarkable ride, really, to
Yeah.
see all that entertainment and to not have to worry about it either.
And
There wasn't a lot of concern in my childhood, which I feel like not to make it political, but there's a bad climate around everything now, it seems like.
and these days, yes, I completely agree with you there. It's not the greatest climate we're in this world, but the one thing that professional wrestling does, and I think you can relate to me on this level here, Jimmy, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a form of escapism. It gets for at least 2 hours whenever we watch, however long we watch of this. It gives us a break from try the trials and tribulations of everyday life. It gives us a few minutes, gives us that moment in time to completely forget about everything that's going on around us and
Yeah.
just get focus on the television and be entertained.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. Similar to, the NFL or any kind of activity that you use to find peace, and also for folks like me that wake up in this universe and on my best day, I'm 5'5", like you're able to also immerse yourself in superstars that are like superheroes. That's the reason why they're built the way that they are. So it is sort of a way for gentlemen and women, men and women, to uh, see a superhero in real time.
And then like in that, especially as a kid, it makes you like, okay, aspire to be something like that or
Yeah.
along those lines. And it's very cool. And it's like the most athletic form of soap opera you'll ever see.
Yeah. The injuries are real. I like that when it goes bad, that's a legit thing. And these guys deserve recognition for the amount of time, sweat, blood, and tears that goes into trying to perform.
Anybody that ever steps in the ring has more guts than 95% of people in this world.
Yeah, I mean, underneath the canvas, it's basically plywood and
a thin
base
layer of pad or whatever. It's very thin.
Like, it's not there. And I'm thinking about like Undertaker doing old school like that. That seems crazy now,
especially on your knees.
Yeah, right.
And he's a 6'10" guy jumping off the top rope, doing that kind of stuff.
And he would do a swan dive out of the ring as a 6'10" dude. Like, what?
There's a guy these days, Jimmy. If you go check him out, and if y'all haven't heard of him at home, you need to go check him out. Keith Lee. This dude is 350 pounds, and he's doing flips running off the ropes and doing flips over the top rope, doing moonsaults,
wow.
He can do all that kind of stuff. He is incredible. He is fantastic. And Jimmy, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Of course. It's a pleasure to catch up, Skylar, and best of luck, man. Professional wrestling will be a good distraction.
It's been a good distraction for the last 2 years.
And in the future, So I think the industry will be around, but like anything else, it'll have to change, I think, to survive.
Yeah, so. It will. Yeah, and it does, adapts, and there's an independent scene that's thriving pretty well right now. So I think the state of professional wrestling is pretty good at this point. But Jimmy, before we decide to wrap things up and go, I just wanted to kind of give you an opportunity because you have your own podcast you host called JBK on Air, and tell the folks at home a little bit about it.
So JBK on Air, during the pandemic, obviously I've kind of been isolated to my own home. So it's basically my creative vessel to put content out that I want to for fans of professional wrestling. I interviewed Scott Romer, who I talked about on here.
Interviewed him on my show as well too. So shout out to Jimmy for that, because he was the one that provided me the info and everything regarding that, and I really appreciate that. And sorry to interrupt you, Jimmy, but continue.
No, man, no. But as Skylar said, he interviewed him on his show. That's a great tape, hour-long thing of a lot of great wrestling stories, and Scott's storied career of several events. For folks that want to follow the podcast, leave a review. You can search it by searching my initials, JBK on Air, ONAIR. And you can also follow me on social media at JBK on Air. So there you go, man.
Yeah, make sure to check out his podcast, JBK on Air, with the man, the myth, the legend, Jimmy himself. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast. So make sure to check that out, and make sure to follow him on social media as well. For Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show, you can follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at Sigdaddy Wrestle, and on Instagram at sigdaddy.wrestle. You can also find the podcast anywhere you get your podcast, whether that's Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, wherever in the world you can get your podcast. You can probably find Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show. So you have no excuse if you can't find it.
Listen to it, people.
Listen to it. There's over 135 episodes now of this show.
For the love of God.
For the love of God, check it out. And leave a review as well. But no, I appreciate everyone who does listen to the show. Love the conversations I have with folks on Twitter regarding wrestling and stuff. Most of the time they're good. And that's all I can ask for, because you're going to get the bad here and there, but most of the time you'll get good stuff from people, hopefully. As long as you don't spread bad mojo, you should be okay. But you can send me a tweet at Sigdaddy Wrestle, and make sure to leave a review for Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show, either on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. That's now featured on there too as well. So yep, check out the show, check out my show, check out JBK's show, JBK on Air. And we're wrapping things up here. Next week on Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show, by the way, will be J.O.'s return. He'll be back. He'll be with me to review a classic TNA show, TNA Wrestling's Destination X 2005. So stay tuned for that next week on Sigdaddy's Wrestling Show. And for Jimmy, I'm Skylar Sigdaddy Sigmund, signing off, saying thank you all for listening, and so long, everybody.